When the gospel hits the culture is the theme for today, and uh, Jacob shared a bit about people coming to faith, and we saw some people or heard about it coming to faith now in the summer, and it's a great joy, and we are all rejoicing when something happens or when Charmaine shares about her family. But we need to remind ourselves about what's our mission or what's the goal, what has God called us to do. And this is a quite well-known Bible verse where it says that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And then he promised he will be with us always. But the point with this is that our mission is not that people are going to get saved. That's not the mission. The mission is to make disciples of them. So of course that people getting saved is necessary in order to get to be a disciple, but being saved isn't the goal. It's just one step on the road in being a disciple. So, and I think especially those of us who are more evangelistic driven, we are all often so eager to reach new people with the gospel. So we are a little bit missing out the discipling part. And also the discipling part is, it's a long-term project, and it's something that isn't. It can't be done over one conversation. People can be saved during one conversation, but the discipling process is something that is much longer, and it also it's different kind of demands for us. If we ask the question, then what is discipleship? And of course, that's the extremely important question. If our mission is to go out and make disciples, then we need to be really clear. What is discipleship? And maybe it's very different in different parts of the world and different contexts. But for me, I think it's quite fascinating that I hear so little like definitions about discipling or discipleship. And I think if we don't know, if we don't have a clear vision about what is it, then we can't aim for it. You know, when you're out, Peter shared that he was lost in the woods. If you don't have a clear way that this is where we're heading, of course you're gonna be lost. No further connections with Peter, but we need to know where we are heading in order to get there. And I think often in discipleship, we don't have a clear goal. We don't have a clear picture. What is discipleship? And therefore, it's very difficult to head there and help people to go there. The best definition of discipleship I've come across is this: is to grow in 3 different areas. So the first one is to grow in knowledge, and to know more about Jesus, about God, about the Bible. We often we have Bible studies or we are reading the Bible just in order to get the knowledge, and this is an important part of the discipleship. The second thing to grow in is in character, to be more Christ-like, grow in holiness. That Paul is writing in Romans that don't be transformed by this world, but that the spiritual transform you. So we don't want to be transformed by this world, but the Spirit will transform us. So it's a character transformation that is natural in the discipleship, and this has also been an important thing over the years with the godlike characters. But the third thing to grow in is what was news to me when I came across this, and it's been really helpful, and that is to grow in skills. And by skills, we can divide the skills into two different kind of skills. The first skill is the kind of skills that all Christians need to have. It could be like, how do I pray, or how do I fast, how do I share the gospel, how do I pray for healing, or whatever. That kind of normal stuff that Jesus is teaching his disciples. But the second part of skill is the skills that comes from giftings that I have been given, that not all people have been given. That could be like as a musician, or it could be as my gifting in prophecy, or it could be a lot of different kind of gifting. But for me to grow as a disciple, it also needs to be to grow in that kind of gifting, or that kind of skills, the specific skills. And we need to find the first thing with the knowledge. That's quite basic. Like all Christian traditions have always emphasizes that knowledge about God is important. So that's an obvious one, and the same with the character stuff. But I think that the skills part is a more challenging part, when to see that being a disciple is to grow in my skills, because then it also gets more hands-on, gets much more practical, and it's not so much theoretical, because the first two you don't really need to take any risks. You don't need, it's not never a risk taking at all. You could be home studying your Bible and growing character, and then you're done. But when it comes to skills, then we are putting ourselves into some kind of risk. For example, praying for healing, or sharing our faith, and that kind of stuff. And then it becomes more difficult and a bit more scary. But I think this is essential. If we ask the question then, how do we grow as disciples, and have this in mind? If you're thinking in your own life, in your own situation, and you're looking back in your life in these three areas, where have you grown, for example, in knowledge, or in character, or in your skills? If I share, I could say that, yeah, in knowledge, I have grown in knowledge in many various situations. It could be in one-on-one conversations, like over lunch, but it could also be in a soccer stadium with tens of thousands of people. Someone is preaching. So the setting doesn't really matters. And also knowledge, I can get knowledge from people who wrote a book several hundred years ago, or so we don't need to have any connection at all. And the Bible, I can read it, or I can listen to it, and it's very much it's possible to do it in all different kind of settings. If we come to the character stuff, I would say that when I've grown in character, it's only in smaller groups. I've never grown in character in a soccer stadium with tens of thousands. I never grow in character by just reading something. It's the character stuff is in when we are close together, like skin to skin, when I'm around other people. Then that's where my character, then that's when I see my character, the weakness in my character. That's when I'm close to other people. But it's also in the closeness that I'm able to grow in character. Because when I'm just sitting home in my sofa watching TV, my character never challenged, because now no one is challenging my character. But it's when we are getting together, the character is able to grow, but also I'm able to share, I'm able to be open and vulnerable, and in that kind of conversation the character can evolve. So we can see that when we grow in character, it's a totally different kind of settings compared to when we grow in knowledge. Then we go to the skills part, and I would say that growing in skills, it depends a lot about what kind of skills you are trying to grow, but also on what kind of level you are in the skills. But for example, praying for healing, I wouldn't say that anyone should start that in a soccer stadium with tens of thousands of people. All of us need to pray for healing in the beginning in a close setting. That's the main. And then we are taking new steps in our skills and our, or for example, having some kind of teaching. You don't start with a big crowd. That's not it's not the best way to do it. The best is to start in the smaller setting, some kind of close and secure environment, and then you grow from there. So the skills part, we can do it in many different settings, but we can see that, for example, a lot of us are in churches where we have a Sunday service that maybe it's 30, 40, 50 or 100 or several hundred people, but that could be an area where we really grow in knowledge, but hardly ever grows in character, and seldom grow in skills. So if we are having that kind of Sunday service structure, then we really need to think, okay, what kind of discipleship growth do we need to have that we can't really do on a Sunday, that we need to do somewhere else? And I think that question is the question that we're trying to cover and answer from different angles during these 4 sessions we're going to have. I'm now going to go into the give you talk about more when the gospel hits the culture, and I'm going to share a simple picture and simple illustration. And actually, I'm just going to share where I got it from, because I think it's also interesting how God works. Because I was in southern Germany in a church conference, and we were heading to a restaurant, a group of people, and I know some of them. And on the way there, it was my 10-15 minutes walk, and I walked beside a man called Ian from Northern Ireland. I don't know his family name. And we didn't were at the same table then at the restaurant. So I've never spoken or seen him ever since. But we have this walk for 10 or 15 minutes, and he shared this picture during that walk, and that's been extremely helpful for me. And I think this is the key situation. We never know when God is like sending someone in our way, and just have a short conversation that could be really, really transforming or enlightening for us, but also when we could be that one for a person. We don't know when we are just suddenly in a conversation with someone, and that could be like a life-changing conversation for them. But the natural way for the gospel into the culture is like this. Here's the gospel, and we see that the gospel hits the culture. So the gospel is always there, and it's always in some. The gospel is never in a vacuum. It's always somewhere. It needs to be in order to. So for example, in Sweden, of course, the gospel is hitting our culture. And what happens when the gospel is hitting the culture? Yeah, in the natural way is that when it has hit the culture, the church creates. Paul is talking about this, that he's saying that I'm for the Jews are being a Jew, and for the Gentiles are being a Gentile. And for example, when we have been working a lot in when the gospel had come to new places, this has been the natural way of doing this, trying to see, okay, so what's happening when the gospel is hitting a culture, and how does that church look like? To be practical about it, it could be like this. Like in when you are coming to I'm looking in Sweden, when Sweden got Christendom back in the years, all people were farmers, so they were milking their cows early morning. So the church service needed to be around 10 or 11 in Sunday morning, because then they've been milking the cows in the morning, and then they have a break before the first and the second milking, because the second milking is around lunchtime. So then the church service was in the Sunday around 10 a.m. because the culture was farmers where they were milking cows. So having a Sunday service in like around 10, 11, that's not part of the gospel, but it's when the gospel hits the culture in a farming society, that church looked like, okay, we are having a Sunday service at 11, because that's how we will fit it in between the milking of the cows. So when this is working, the gospel comes to the culture, and the church is being created when the gospel have hit on the culture, and the church helps us to realize the gospel. That's where we are discovering Jesus and the gospel. So this kind of circle is like the natural way, or the good way of it to look like. And I know it's a really traditional building of the picture of the church, and so I'm not that's a good illustration, but it's not sure that the way the church should look like, as you we are of course talking about house churches or whatever, but it was difficult to find a picture of a house church, so that's why it looks like this. But if we take this, when the church doesn't really know what the gospel is and isn't, this is the situation in my country, for example. Then it looks like this. We have the culture, and we have the church, and then we have the gospel there. So the church and the gospel are so strongly connected, so we can't really discern what is the church that is a natural outcome of or offspring of the gospel hitting the culture, becoming a church, and what is the gospel and what is the church. For example, it's really difficult to almost all churches in Sweden, for example, are democratically run, and the reason for that is that the gospel, when it hits the culture, our culture and society was in a strong democratically process. So being a democratically built organization was the natural way to become a church. But the democratic situation is not from the gospel, it's from the culture. And therefore, the church is democratically built. It doesn't mean that it's a bad system, but we need to see that the democratically built church is not part of the gospel, it's part of from the culture. So the problem for us in this picture and in the situation that we are, that is that we are having the gospel and the church so strongly connected, so we can't separate them. We can't know, okay, what is the gospel and what is the church? it's really for example, trying then to share the gospel, it's difficult because we don't really know what the gospel is. So what we are sharing is, yeah, come to church, because we are like mixing the church and the gospel together. We don't have a distinction between them at all. Another situation could be like this. It's when the culture and the church unite. Then we have the gospel, but then we have the church and the culture, and they are united. And I can see this in my country in a lot of ways as well. For example, the church and the culture having the same kind of moral values. We are not, you don't find some kind of different standards between what the culture is saying and what the church is doing. And we can see this in a lot in historically, when the power in the society and the church are getting together, then they are really supporting each other, and you don't see the church to be salt and light at all, because they are really strongly tied together. So in this picture, we will get a really a worldly church that is not doing this kind of circle that lets the gospel hits the society or the culture and then becomes the church. Another issue we have is like this: when the culture and gospel try to unite, and this is more in some kind of ideology, when we are saying, for example, that we are the gospel or the true liberation is in our for example, if we look back in a lot of the former communist countries during the communist times in the mid 20th century, they said that the gospel and the liberation, that's the communists. So they are like taking it and trying to use like the gospel and Jesus for their political views, and we can find this in many ways, and we see that then the church and they are separating, and from my point of view, I don't see this where I am aware now, but I can see this more in a historical way, and probably maybe you can see it in your societies. The problem is when times goes by, it will look something like this: that the gospel, and then we have a new culture, because the old culture have changed. For example, the organization that I'm part of is 165 years old or something. When we started in a big revival, the Swedish culture were different than it is today. But the problem is that the church is remaining. It's the church that were created out of the gospel hitting the culture is now remaining, but the culture is totally different. So we see that the gospel is always hitting the culture, but nothing else happens. Because the church is totally apart from the culture, so it's not relevant at all. This could also happen and has been happening a lot when we're looking in foreign mission. For example, I've been in churches, several churches in East Africa mainly, where I've been singing Swedish hymns on Swedish pipe organs in churches made in a Swedish architectural style. That was because then we didn't like share the gospel, for example, then in Ethiopia, but we shared the church. We transformed the church, so we didn't let the gospel hit the Ethiopian culture, and create an Ethiopian church, but we made the Swedish church meet Ethiopia and become a Swedish church in Ethiopia. And this has been a problem in foreign missions a lot of times, but it's definitely a problem for us because our society and culture is changing, but the church is remaining. And the solution is like this, that we need to see, okay, the gospel hits the new culture and another kind of church, another way of being church is formed. And of course, it's not the church building now, as you understand, but it's how are we church in this kind of culture. And now we are, if we have this picture with this circle, we can talk about that the culture and the society could also differ a lot within the context. For example, I'm living in a city with 500,000 inhabitants. If you go to the poor areas, it's a totally different culture compared to the rich areas. How people live, what are their values, how is their daily schedule, etc., etc. We have I don't know, we have a lot of immigrants in Gothenburg, probably from 100 different nations or something. So depending on what kind of immigrant group you go to, you're meeting a new culture, a new kind of setting that and that will definitely make a result that the church setting will be different. And that is what we see if I see in a Swedish context, that the Filipino church looks different from the Iranian church, that is different from the Brazilian church, and it's different from the Kenya church, or because it's the same gospel, it's all people living in Sweden, but their culture and their situation, their society is different, and therefore their churches are different. So this is more of a now we are maybe on a more theoretical level. So we're thinking about, okay, how does this apply to discipleship? And if we take this picture that we have the gospel, and here are now the people that we are having around us who we want to disciple. So we need to take the same, like use the arrows and say, okay, we want to grow close to Jesus. This is the kind of people. This is the group of people that we're working with. How is discipleship looking for them? Yeah, probably maybe like this. This is how the discipleship looks like for them. Or in a different context, it looks like this. Those kind of people, yeah, we are having our meeting like this. And now it's not about like having discussion or drinking beer. It's not that. That's the challenge. But we to give you some examples of what I'm meaning is like this. When I was part of a church in Uppsala, where we have a lot of students, and people moved into a lot of young adults, and most of them were students, so people in their 20s. They have left their family, and a lot of them were like quite new in the city, so they didn't have so much friends. So for them, meeting for like 4 hours on a Wednesday night was an extremely good way of discipling, because they had a lot of time. They were lacking friendship. They were lacking these kind of intimate relationships, and yeah, would love to. I have several people who asked, can I be part of 2 of these small groups, because I don't have so much to do on the evening, so I would love to be part of 2 of them. So then it's two nights that I know what I'm doing. I'm looking now in my situation with 2 small kids. that are going to bed at like 7 or 8, or starting to go to bed like 7 or half 7. I can't be away at all on evenings. Or if I'm away, my wife will be home with the kids. So trying to have 4 hours in a night with discipling when we are having small kids, we would never have anyone who come for that kind of discipling group. And we can see this if we compare, if you are having people, for example, who are unemployed or retired people, maybe it's really good that we're meeting for an extended time, because people are bored, and it's really good. It's really good for us to meet and have a lot of time together. And then I have friends here who are working 70 hours a week at least. I have one friend. He's working. He's living in Gothenburg, and he's working in Stockholm. So he's taking the morning flight at 5 o'clock, 5:30, the first flight, and coming back with a flight at 5 p.m. Having dinner with the kids, putting them to bed, and goes to bed at 7 himself. And in order to get up at 3, start working, going to the airport, and take the plane to Stockholm. That's how he's working, and working 70 to 80 hours a week. I would never be able to invite him to a lengthy discipling gathering with retired people or unemployed who would love to stay and chat for hours. If he would be able to meet for a discipling, that would probably some rare days when he is in Gothenburg and we could meet for lunch, very focused, or maybe on Saturday mornings. That will be the possible time for him to be able to be a disciple. And if we look at this on a broader level, we can see in some parts of the world, it's we live in a way where the family is crucial. So the discipleship needs to be made in the family. We can't make disciples like apart from the family. We must be in the family. In the society I live in, we can definitely be disciples outside the family. So, for example, we can meet just guys and have a discipling group. So we need to find ways for us to say, okay, so how is the culture and the group of people that I am having around me, people that wants to grow as disciples, or people that we are longing to reach with the gospel. And then the question is, okay, so how do we gather and make disciples? Both in for how long time, how effectively will it be? How much time do we have? When during the week can we do this? And what will we focus on if we see compares to other things that we're doing, like as a community? Is it the knowledge that we will focus on? Is it the skills part? Is it the character? Where is the different parts of the growing as disciples coming in? And this definitely will differ. It will differ from us in different nations, definitely. But of course, it will differ within, as I said, in a city, depending on which kind of people are you sent to here. Is it the single moms in that area, or is it students, or is it elderly people, or whatever are we sent to? And the discipling part will look different. Stop sharing my screen and asking Jacob and Marxis, do you want to comment or add something?